The Great Molasses Flood. On January 15, 1919, Boston's North End waterfront was busy with workers, horses, and freight cars moving through the industrial district. At 529 Commercial Street stood a massive steel storage tank owned by the Purity Distilling Company. The tank rose 50 feet high and 90 feet across, holding over 2 million gallons of crude molasses. It was a normal winter afternoon, unseasonably warm at 40 degrees. Workers moved through the streets below, unaware of what was about to happen. Just after 12:30 in the afternoon, the tank exploded. A wave of molasses 25 feet high burst outward at 35 miles per hour. The force ripped the steel tank apart and sent massive panels flying through the air. One piece of steel crushed the firehouse across the street. The wave smashed buildings, buckled elevated train tracks, and swept people off their feet. Horses and workers were thrown into the brown surge. The sound was described as a roar followed by a machine gun-like rattling as rivets shot through the air like bullets. But the cold weather made everything worse. The molasses was thick and viscous, more like wet concrete than liquid. Those caught in the wave could not swim or move their limbs. The sticky mass trapped victims in place, covering their faces and filling their mouths. A boy was swept onto the crest of the wave and carried down the street before being thrown against a building. Others were not as fortunate. 21 people drowned or suffocated in the molasses. The thick liquid prevented them from breathing, coating their airways and lungs. Rescuers struggled to reach victims because they could barely move through the waist-deep sludge. Some died pinned beneath debris, unable to call for help as the molasses hardened around them. Bodies were recovered over the following days, pulled from the sticky mass that had turned solid in the cold. The Pemberton Mill Collapse. On January 10, 1860, the Pemberton Mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts employed over 900 workers in its 5-story textile factory. Most were women and children who operated the looms and spinning machines. The building was only 7 years old, but had been constructed with substandard materials and poor engineering. That afternoon, workers filled every floor as machines ran at full capacity. At 4:45, without warning, the entire structure collapsed. The floors pancaked downward, crushing machinery and workers into a mangled heap of bricks, timber, and iron. Over 600 people were trapped in the rubble. Rescue efforts began immediately. Workers and townspeople rushed to the site and started pulling survivors from the wreckage. They worked through the evening by lamplight, carefully removing debris to reach those pinned beneath. Voices called out from deep within the ruins. Some were injured but alive, waiting to be freed. The work was slow and dangerous. Every beam removed risked causing another collapse. Hours into the rescue operation, someone accidentally knocked over a lantern. The oil spilled onto cotton fabric scattered throughout the debris. Fire ignited instantly. Flames spread through the wreckage with terrifying speed, fed by the massive quantities of cotton, wood, and machine oil mixed into the ruins. The fire became an inferno within minutes. Rescuers were forced to step back from the heat. Those they had been working to free were now beyond reach. Screams came from people trapped beneath beams and machinery as fire surrounded them. One man, pinned in place with no hope of escape, took a piece of metal and cut his own throat rather than burn to death. Others had no choice but to endure the flames. The fire consumed dozens of workers who had survived the initial collapse. In total, 145 people died in the Pemberton Mill disaster. Many of them burned alive while rescuers watched helplessly from only feet away.